Yes. My name is Kevin Bates, and I'm a pastor in Sherwood, Oregon. Each and every week, we desire to take theological principles, biblical stories, and narratives, and all the genres of Scripture and help you immerse yourself in order to embody and apply them to your everyday life. I want to encourage you to tune into this online broadcast each and every week. And ways you can support our ministry is to first follow our Instagram page, like our Facebook page. You can listen to this online broadcast and make comments under whatever social media channel you listen to. And you can financially support our ministry through our website, resonatelife.org, under the Give tab. So you are joining us live tonight. This is Thursday night, 8:30 Pacific Standard Time for this broadcast. This is going to be replayed, or you can access this broadcast on our Facebook page or YouTube channel, and it will be replayed on Sunday morning as a part of our Sunday morning offering. Every Thursday night, we come together for this to do a deeper dive, what we call a deeper dive. And if you've been following us online, I want you to remember that we've been in a series called Atlas of the Heart. And today we are talking about the biblical view of emotions created when we search for connection. So I'm joined today with Sheree Bodner and Jake Flug, two of my leaders at Resonate. Good evening, Jake and Sheree.
Good evening, hello. Kevin.
So what was that background noise we were getting there? We're just like continually working on our technical difficulties.
Jazz standards.
Yeah.
I think Rob at the shop at Symposium, and so I think Amanda's cleaning the house right now. Is what is happening.
That makes total sense. Yes,
that is funny.
That is funny. Well, we do the very best that we can with what we've been given. That's what I'm learning through this series, right? All right. Well, let's get started because we have a lot to talk about tonight, and I don't have anything to bring up like interesting. The start.
They found the Goonies ship. That was a.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
that was an interesting thing.
Like
so One-Eyed Willie, the story. Yes, from the story. So Steven Spielberg, when he made that movie, he went to Astoria and learned about the folklore of One-Eyed Willie and the pirate ship out in the coast of Astoria.
Oh, there's actually something there?
Yeah, there was actually something folklore. They found. Boards. They found boards from an ancient ship 500 years ago or whatever. I don't know. This crazy old ship that I think was going from the Philippines to Spain, or they were transporting
got lost in Oregon.
Goods, and they got lost in Oregon. So people for years have found porcelain on the beaches washing up, and it finally made sense that it was coming actually from this shipwreck, and the story was true. Well, they found those in a cave, I think. This weird cave.
That's awesome.
Yeah, totally. And Supreme Court overruled, I think today, something. New York's
open carry New York. Yeah, you can't open carry that probable cause.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can now open carry, or they deemed it unconstitutional. So we're still working on carry laws. And what else happened today? Oh, the Jake just sent this out. If anyone is interested, you should go to Oregon.gov, and you should check out Every Student Belongs. So this goes along with our topic today. Every Student Belongs is a program in Oregon that students' health and safety are the cornerstones of education, and that all students are entitled to a high-quality educational experience free from discrimination or harassment based on perceived race, color, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, or national origin, and without fear or hatred, racism, or violence. All staff and leaders are also entitled to work in environments that are free from discrimination or harassment. Visitors should be able to participate in school activities without fear for their safety. So that's not new. It's not a new concept, but definitely for a program, and actually an Every Student Belongs program, and I don't know if they would call it a law. I guess it would be a law, a form of law that was enacted prohibits hate symbols, specifically 3, the most recognized symbols of hate in the U.S., the swastika, the Confederate flag, and the noose.
Yep.
So
Newburgh School Board voted to overturn that last summer. So here we are.
Yeah.
There we are.
Every student belongs. So that's an interesting idea that just, is very prominent in the news these days. All right, that's what we're talking about tonight is belonging, fitting in, connection, disconnection, insecurity, invisibility, and loneliness. Those are the topics for tonight. Places where we go when we search for connection. When we search for connection, belonging, fitting in, connection, disconnection, insecurity, invisibility, and loneliness. Those are some interesting topics, I think, that are very, very real. So Sharia is going to take invisibility and loneliness. Jake's going to take connection, disconnection, insecurity. And I'm going to take belonging and fitting in, and that's how we're going to break it up. So I'm going to start and then shut my mouth, and then the other two are just going to go, and I'll fill in whatever blanks they allow me to fill in. Because I talk a lot, and I just need to shut up sometimes and allow other people to speak and allow space for people to talk. So anyway, let's talk about belonging and fitting in. Belonging and fitting in is considered in psychology a irreducible need. And I learned this differently, I guess, in probably high school, where Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a psychological principle where you have basically needs that are the needs of human beings are broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories. And those 5 categories you can see that we're posting there right now. These are human beings' needs that need to be fulfilled in order for us to be a thriving, alive human, that we need to be an alive human as well. And so I learned it this way, a little bit different than Brene Brown is speaking about in her book, Atlas of the Heart. If anyone who wants to show that book right now, you can. But do we see it? Is it there?
No, we can't.
It's behind.
I'm behind
we
the
can't see
pyramid.
it.
I can't.
Yeah, it's okay.
There we
go.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob.
Atlas of the Heart. Yeah, thank you, Rob. All right, so Atlas of the Heart, that's what we're going through with this, looking at a biblical perspective of emotions. So I learned this a long time ago, since I'm 50 and I'm like an old man now to some people. Some people I'm very young, other people I'm very old, depending on your perspective. I think that I am just seasoned and like fine wine, getting better with age. But Maslow's 19-something, probably 50, 40s, 50s, 60s. It's early. I think it's 40s or 50s if I remember right. So Maslow's, you have categories of needs that if you don't get these fulfilled, you'll basically, there's all kinds of deaths that you can go through, emotional death or even physical death. And so the bottom part of this pyramid is a deficiency need, and then the top part of the pyramid is basically your self-awareness or your being, like your soul. So the top of the pyramid, that top triangle, really is the only top part of Maslow's hierarchy that has to do with self-actualization, being, soul, spirit, mind, kind of the ethos of living is that top pyramid. And it's used to be called being. That's where on being comes from, like your being, like your whole sense of being. So that's the very top. But then the bottom part in psychology, or at least old school psychology, and since this is old and she uses an old concept in her book, we just have to declare it old and try to make it new somehow. But if you don't have your physiological needs, so if you think about physiological needs, if you go long enough without that being fulfilled, you'll die Physiological
Can we
need.
define what those are, since it's a big word for
Oh,
big people?
physiological is your body. So your physiological need is like a biological human sustenance, water, food, shelter, air. Those are all the physio. If you go without oxygen, you'll die. If you go without food, you'll die. You go without water, you'll die. Eventually, you'll go without.
Maslow puts that sleep and also like sexual intercourse is also in physiological needs, the need to reproduce, and that goes beyond just humans at that point. And it's humans that the model is that it's self-actualization. Maslow's pyramid comes out of 1943.
Cha-ching. Ring the bell for me. So I knew it was early. I didn't know it was that early, though. 1943. That's a long time ago. And we're still using it. So physiological needs. Safety. I don't know what he meant by safety. Are you looking something up there, Jake, for me? I guess that would be to be security. If you go a long time under threat, that has a psychological effect on your body, and your mind. So
internal is mostly safety, and it has to do with health, personal safety, which is bodily, emotional, and financial. And so it does have the
security
access. Yeah, it's all security based, but also the threat of injury is also in that security as well.
Okay, so your safety, your security is within that. Then we have love and belonging. So love and belonging right at the center of this pyramid. I don't think that's meant that there's nothing that necessarily is meant by having it at the center of the pyramid in its initial intention. Although you can say that right at the center of the pyramid of thought is that love and belonging are key to, and it's considered a deficiency, or what's another word? What's the opposite of deficiency?
Surplus?
No, enough.
Abundance?
So enough. You have abundance, but the opposite of scarcity is enough. Mm-hmm. So love and belonging, you need enough love and belonging to survive. Safety, you need enough safety to survive. Physiological, here's a good example. If you eat too much food, that will also kill you eventually.
Yeah.
So physiological
what you said
need,
there
you
was
need
important.
Enough.
The opposite of scarcity, what we put as the opposite of scarcity is always overabundance or like exuberance, but instead it's just enough.
Can I speak to the idea of the order of it and why love and belonging is in the center?
Yeah, because I don't know. I'm not thinking that Maslow had some like amazing thoughts behind that, but go ahead.
Okay. If I remember my college courses correctly, I believe the idea is
because I'm trying to remember mine, and mine's a lot longer than yours.
Bottom level is most foundational.
Yes.
Those are the things that we need. And if we have those needs mostly fulfilled, then we can be concerned with issues of safety and security. But then we can't feel love and belonging unless a certain amount of our safety and security needs are met. So each of those levels builds on each other.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if we don't survive the night, we can't have love and belonging and esteem.
Yeah.
So I made a mistake already. So it's Maslow's.
Maslow.
Not Victor Maslov.
Pavlov.
Maslov is the famous Russian mathematician.
When the dogs went
Maslov.
up the pyramid.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's not the point. I'm trying to get to the top of the pyramid. Help me get to the top of the pyramid.
Let's go
So
there.
Okay.
now we have go climb. I'm almost to the top of the mountain.
Esteem.
So esteem, yes, esteem. You have, this is the idea of dignity. And what's really interesting is the Germans back in World War II, the Nazis, what they did is they removed esteem. They removed dignity from a group of people. They were threatening a person's dignity. And that had a lot of survival issues around it. People did not survive without a level of dignity. And so we think of dignity differently than maybe, because that's a really super sad and horrific, time, and is a horrible. Yet I think we see allusions to that even today, where we look at different people groups and we perform or say or do similar, I guess, actions, and similar, like, illusions of actions that could eventually turn into a genocide situation if left unchecked and left, just run rampant.
Yeah. Would you say the opposite then is like dehumanization?
Well, yeah. So a positive aspect of enough esteem would be dehumanization or lack of dignity, taking somebody's dignity away.
Yeah.
So I think about when I think about, okay, well, what do we do on that form of scale to a certain people group and remove their dignity? Can you guys think of an example where we remove dignity on the level of, like, horrificness? I'm not saying it's the
hard
same.
to think of something
It
as
has an
horrific as the
illusion of
Holocaust.
feeling the same.
Well, any
Yeah.
genocidal
Yeah.
action would be the same. I mean, not to negate the Holocaust at all. More Russians died after Lenin and Stalinism and their own people than the Jews in the Holocaust. I think it's like 5-1. Apartheid or apartheid, that was a huge one. Native Americans in the United States, I think we have a responsibility of millions and millions of deaths.
Yeah, and I think especially with the residential schools and the efforts to get rid of language and culture completely, really shows that lack of treating people with dignity.
Yeah, and there is now found a mass Native American child grave at the Chemawa Indian School in Salem. So that's only 40 miles from us.
Right. And the reason why I brought that up, because I was thinking Native Americans myself, First Nation people, the reason why that's so relatable to other horrific acts worldwide is because it's a Maslow's hierarchy of need threat. See, these threats or these issues really are universal to worldwide population. It's not just isolated to, a European population or isolated to one people group like the United States. It's universal amongst all people. So when you take away and you dehumanize people, you're actually threatening a universal human experience. And so that's why these are really important. You get up to self-actualization, and self-actualization is, I would say that you can bring this into the animal world. You could, in a way. Some people think it's a little more than others. self-actualization in the animal world.
Paisley is living the best life, man.
Yeah, Paisley's living the best
life now.
Right. This is the actualization of potential, or this is like the self-actualization of purpose. And really it has a lot to do. Yeah, it has a lot to do with seeking personal fulfillment. There's a lot of things that, like they say, somebody my age is at their peak of career, peak of like personhood. Somebody that enters into their 50s is like just ready to slide down the other side. Basically, it's all downhill. It's all downhill from here. So we've invested enough. We've, supposedly, although I have a 5-year-old at home, so I have a long ways to go.
You have a long time
but we've supposedly raised our children, and now we're sliding back. So these are universal ideas that when they're threatened, they have a very human, raw consequence to them. So love and belonging, if that is right in the center, love and belonging, if you experience deficiency in love and belonging, then that has a very human consequence to it. It is a felt deficiency.
And like what Shrey was saying is that all of these pyramid items build on each other. And so if you don't have love and belonging, your esteem is shattered. If anyone knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're noticing that the aesthetic section above esteem is gone. I believe that Brené Brown just couples self-actualization in with asceticism. Aesthetics, not asceticism, sorry, aesthetics. Mm-hmm. And so if love and belonging are not in place and secure, then your transcendence into something better, like more, is gone, and also your esteem is shot.
Pretty low,
right? Well, I would say that is a very old triangle. I'm sure that that's been worked over and over and over. There's another old concept we're going to bring up called attachment. I want to say disorder theory. Thank you. There are disorders when it comes to attachment, but we're going to bring up an old theory called attachment theory. But in talking about these, if you take something old like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you say, okay, those are irreducible needs. Those are irreducible concepts in our life. So belonging is one of those ideas that sounds simple, but it actually is not simple at all. It actually takes a lot of work and time, a lot of investment, a lot of relationship. Downtown Sherwood tonight, we're having an art walk where people are walking around in downtown, and they're visiting businesses and organizations and stuff, and they're visiting artists, and art is displayed through all the businesses of downtown. And what's really interesting about our artist that was in Symposium tonight is she said, I'm just praying that I would be able to develop new relationships around art. And I really thought that was interesting, that she really wanted to invest in our community and build relationships around art. So her idea of loving art, loving people, but establishing a place or a conversation that begins to nurture a sense of belonging, that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of prayer. So just because you join a community group or you're a part of a church, those of you who are a part of a church, does not mean that you belong to that church. You might be attending, you might be showing up on Sunday or attending a Wednesday night group or whatever group you're a part of. It doesn't mean that you actually belong. So belonging is that desire to be a part of something that's bigger than us. So you can become a part of a group, but if the group doesn't have purpose and meaning, and it just becomes a group. And so there's a lot of clubs out there that you can join, that you can attend, but that doesn't mean that you actually belong there. And I would say, and I would go as far to say, if the group doesn't have a greater purpose than showing up and having a few cocktails and chit chat. I think, I think that's not really, that's not a belonging place. That might be just a showing up place,
But do I get a hat?
I don't know. If you get a hat, then you
Is
like
there a
actually
tassel
belong.
on the hat?
Nah.
Is there a tassel? Do we have special signs and symbols and handshakes before
Do
we
I
get
get
into
to drive a bathtub?
Yeah, the old Cheers song. What's his name?
Everybody
yeah.
knows
That what's his
Norm?
name that played in Cheers? No, well, but the guy that the
Not
lead.
Ted Danza.
Ted. No, not Ted Danza. Ted. Anyway, whatever that guy's name is, look it up, Rob, and put it in the chat for us. Where everybody knows your name, right?
It's like Symposium.
So where everybody knows your name, identity.
Ted Danson. That's close. Ted
Danson.
Danson.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
Not Danza.
Ted Danson.
Danson.
Yeah. So where everybody knows your name, identity with your name, if we can start there, that is a first step of belonging, is identifying that you are a person. So belonging is actually showing up somewhere that you want to be, but being a part of somewhere you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
and they want you too.
Mm-hmm.
They want you with all your hurts, habits, hangups, and crap. They actually want you there. Fitting in is different. Fitting in is going someplace that you want to be, but they don't care who you are. They just want you to be like them. So the church is notorious for being this way, and which is awful to say. And I'm a pastor, and I'm going to be, not the first to say it, but I'll at least be the first on this broadcast to say it, is the church is notorious for making people into who they are versus allowing them to be who they are and to love Jesus. So time and time again, you see in Scripture, all through Scripture, that Jesus is, all through the Gospels, that Jesus is addressing people that are different. You have the Samaritans, you have, the prostitutes and the beggars, you have the tax collectors, everybody that nobody wants, right, in the time. And they're rejecting all these people. And Jesus approaches these people and basically invites them to the table and breaks bread, eats, and fellowships with these people. He dines with notorious sinners. So that is Jesus's model, where belonging around the table, and if you use the table as a metaphor, breaking of bread and sitting around the table and eating, your turkey or mashed potatoes or whatever you're doing, sitting around a table, that's the metaphor of belonging. Do you have a spot? Do you have a place at the table? Do you want to be there? And do they want you there? So Jesus was threatening to the Pharisee because they didn't care who the people were. They just wanted the people to be like them. And that is fitting in. So fitting in is really kind of a dangerous rhythm, and it has some consequences to it. If you're always trying to fit in, that means you're trying to change who you are constantly, and depending on how many groups you try to fit in with. But being accepted by everyone else who you are. So that threatens our conservative Christianity when it comes to people that are different. So what do we do with somebody that's gay? What do we do with somebody that's trans? What do we do with somebody that lives together? What do we do with somebody that's pregnant outside of wedlock? What do we do with all of these, sexual, sex? It just seems like everything revolves around sex a lot of times, but what do we do with all of these ideas around sex? And people come into the church and we say, okay, you have to clean all that up before you get in the water. And Jesus doesn't ever say that. He says, get in the water. That's what Jesus says. Just get in the water. Or he actually just says, follow me. So he doesn't say not to change your life. He actually says, go and sin no more. But what does that mean? And I think that that's more of a metaphor of, don't just go out and purposely not love your neighbor, it means then how do we then accept people, invite people to the table, and not feel so threatened? So I'll just take this. Who is our enemy? So are we going to invite the enemy to the table? Because all of those people that I just listed, I would never in a million years think that they are my enemy. Not in a million years. They're not my enemy. So I could invite and have dinner and break bread and just have special handshakes and wear hats with tassels with them and, have a good time and call ourselves a club. And we would belong together. We would have a purpose, and we would have, just a band of brothers and sisters, and we would be good. But then how about the, Texan gun-toting, cowboy hat wearing, misogynist, just jerk pants? How about that person? So there's a state senator, and he comes in. Oh, no, it's not state senator. He's running for state senate, and he on his card he said, "I'm not your average candidate." He's running for state senator, and on the card, "I'm not your average candidate." And everything and he says, "Well, I'm running on the conservative ticket for the Oregon State Senate." And everything, and I would say this about a Democrat too, if they had this listed, everything that
primaries.
Yes.
No. What?
Yes.
I know that dude.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Like, not
I think so.
but I know who this dude is. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he comes in and he's like, "I'm not your average candidate." He actually says that to me. "I'm not your average candidate." And everything that he said was average. From that point forward, everything he said was just completely average. So I'm just looking at him going,
"Okay." To be their tagline this time.
I'm like,
"Where's your Uggs?"
Something new? Why don't you say something new to me? Say something new. Give me something to think about. Don't just give me the same old pitch line that I've been hearing for the last, handful of years. Give me something fresh to think about to fix the problems and the challenges that I face. Stop talking about wearing masks and not wearing masks and how I'm so grateful we don't have to wear masks anymore. How about let's address minimum wage and rent caps, and how about let's address real things instead of talking about mandates that are not even mandates anymore. So what was really frustrating to me is here he's not this average candidate, and everything he said was just the same old regurgitated platform that he's running on. So why did I bring that up? I have no idea why I brought that up. But
he's your enemy.
Does he have a seat at the table?
Does he have? Yes. Thank you. I swear I'm going to change things. Really, I know. I've been hearing that since high school senior class president ran for president, promising us soda pop machines in the hallway. And it was not legal in the state of California at the time to have soda pop machines in the hallways of school.
But they sure tried.
They sure tried. Those senior class presidents try to get us, hallway soda pop machines. It makes absolutely no sense what people run on platforms they run on for politics. So if I disagree with somebody's politics, are they invited at the table? Because someone said that's really hard for me.
Invited to theirs.
Yeah, I know. Are you invited to their table? It doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about, because you're not invited to their table. I can guarantee you that. But
you were.
The enemy
uninvited?
Yeah. So what you think an enemy is, are they invited to the table? So Jesus and his love your neighbor is a universal concept. So that's for everyone, including your enemy. So that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge that we have. And I believe somehow, in a kingdom third way, we can find a place for everybody at the table. Maybe we all just need to shut our mouths and wear funny hats with tassels and not talk about anything.
If we just keep eating, we don't have to talk.
Yeah,
then we
exactly.
can all be at the table.
So this happened with Paul, in 1 Corinthians 1, and I'm going to read this verse. My brothers and sisters, Chloe's people gave me some information about you, that you're fighting with each other. What I mean is this, that each one of you says this: I belong to Paul, I belong to Apollos, I belong to Kepha, I belong to Christ. So they were belonging to different preachers. So this preacher was saying something different than this preacher that was saying something different than another preacher. And basically, he's like, why are you fighting? Why are you following these people? So I would say this about any person that is so wrapped up into governmental politics and following a person. That person has become a gospel savior to them in a lot of cases, which is really dangerous and sad, because we have Jesus as our savior. We don't need another savior. So people who talk, let's just put it this way: if you talk more about a politician than you do Jesus, I mean, honestly, like, why are you talking so much about politicians? And that has been the sentiment and the rhythm of Christians in the last couple of years. They're talking about politics so much, and it's like, what is the right way? Well, let's get back to the Bible. Let's look at scripture. Let's look at what Jesus would say. And Jesus would care about the prostitute. Jesus would care about the houseless. Jesus would care about certain people. He would be anti-violence, and we can talk about that over turkey dinner one day. But Jesus would talk about those things around that table. And so I asked a people group, give me, well, we won't bring that up. That's too political. Anyway, so in 1 Corinthians 1, it says, I belong to these people. And Paul is trying to correct and say, no, you belong to Jesus. And that's who you belong to. You're following these and trying to fit in with these people. So just for my 2 points of this talk is belonging and fitting in are 2 different ideas. Belonging is when we actually have purpose together. We actually are together following something that is greater than who we are, and that is Jesus and his ways. I think we need to go back to God's ways. If you think that the church right now is following God's ways, universal church across the United States, the rhetoric you hear, the slamming that you hear, the shaming you hear, those are not God's ways. And the church needs to go back to God's ways. 2, what I would say, just coin, because I didn't say it, Jesus actually said it, loving your neighbor. So, Jake.
Okay.
Was that just too much to process, or what? Am I just talking?
It was a lot, but it was great. Good job.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Do you want to show your cartoons or no? Or are you good?
No, I'm good with the cartoons. I've said enough.
They're cute though. Read the book. Read the cartoons.
Yeah.
They're adorable.
Sorry, I was just waiting for something else. So let's talk about connection and disconnection. Well, I thought you were going to get the DACA and all this stuff, but we can go into that.
Let's.
And DEI. That was a great section. There's some really great stuff in the book. Just pick it up. But now we're going to talk about connection and disconnection. Rob, if you want to throw up that chart real fast, we'll start with this chart, please. The attachment styles. Your family of origin has a huge impact on who you are, what you do, how you relate to the world. And so a lot of it goes even beyond your cognitive reality. A lot of it goes beyond even, and science will prove, even your lifetime, and how trauma can be generational. And so one of the biggest studies is that Jewish families that are descendants of Holocaust victims have a certain genetic trait that follows them through time. And so they can tell or not if your grandparents went through the Holocaust based upon this certain DNA strand in your body. And so trauma generational, anxiety generational, lots of mental illnesses are generational, genetic, I should say. And a lot of the times what your parents struggled with, you will also struggle with, because that's your genetic disposition towards those things. And so when we talk about connection and disconnection, just think about how you have...
There?
Go ahead.
I was just going to add that sometimes what you struggle with, that your parents struggled with, doesn't dilute. It sometimes becomes stronger.
It can, yeah. Depending on if you're getting help for it, depending on... Yeah, sometimes, and I think a lot of that has to do with environment. The diluteness of, like, say, your family has a disposition towards ADHD, and your grandfather's nickname was Buzz, and he was everywhere all the time. Your disposition towards anxiety and ADHD will probably be much greater than not. And so you can see throughout your family dynamic that things follow you, whether you like it or not.
Name your family dynamic?
No, I did not yet. We'll get to that in the avoidant personality disorder.
It's not a disorder. You're okay.
It is.
Yeah.
Anyways. So, Rob, if you want to make that chart bigger now, we can get into this. So, there are 4 different types of attachment. There's secure, anxious, dismissive, and fearful. Those are some words for them. I know them as something different. Kevin pulled this chart up. Secure.
I couldn't find
anxious,
the chart.
Ambivalent, and I forget the last
disorganized?
one. Let's go. Disorganized.
Disorganized.
Fearful
and
of
so,
what is
so anxious.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Anxious. So you have secure.
Yeah.
And anxious, preoccupied. And then you have avoidant and disorganized. But I did learn ambivalent. And so I'm not sure if the new term or the old term is disorganized, ambivalent, or
no, that's
avoidant.
anxious, ambivalent.
Okay, anxious, ambivalent. Okay, all right,
Correct.
got it. Thank you.
Anxious, ambivalent, and then
This is kind of a new chart. I'm not sure about this.
Yeah,
chart.
totally. And then you have avoidant, and then you have disorganized. And so secure attachments is as you are growing up, especially in the early years of attachment, that your parents are present, they are fulfilling your needs, they're emotionally mature, and they are helping you develop and not helicoptering or lawnmower parenting your life so that you don't come to adversity. And so they're setting you up for
Fred,
the most.
Fred, my dad is watching right now. Should I analyze my life about?
Yes,
well,
you could.
And I want to say it's important to say with secure attachment that your parents hit that mark most of the time, because nobody is perfect and gets there all of the time.
But let's just say that most people...
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is fulfilled enough.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many parents can even perform this way. I mean,
most of the time, yeah.
Most of the time, you're not going to be in the secure model because we are humans and we function out of avoidant, anxious, and fearful patterns based upon our limbic system. And so it takes a very cognitive choice to instill secure parenting models in your children. Anxious or an ambivalent model is your bringing on your yeah, I can do it for you if you want me to. Anxious ambivalent is your you're not present. You are present sometimes. Sometimes you'll help with hard things. Sometimes you'll be there. Sometimes. And so the child becomes anxious that not all the times their needs will be met. And then you have dismissive or avoidant. And that means that problems are not going to be present. This is the I am right, you're wrong, your emotions don't matter. You are a child, I am the adult, I am the authority, you are the subordinate. And it's always this talking down to. And I think that in our American system,
children to be seen, not heard.
Children to be seen, not heard. I think it's a very works-based perfectionist, and we can get into that later on too, is how perfectionism drives disconnection. But the idea of avoidance is you're avoiding emotion at all cost, because either you're afraid that your child's emotional needs will take more space than what you need for your own emotional needs, or you don't have the emotional language to deal with your child. And so that becomes also from your parents and your parents' parents. And it's this generational thing that it takes a very cognitive effort to stop and go into the secure attachment style. Fearful or disorganized, I'm not really know how to even describe that beyond
Usually
it's disorganized.
Usually shows up with people that have endured lots of trauma and abuse as a young child. So the neural pathways that are in our brains that are carved through trauma, PTSD, can occur, so that when we're now as adults triggered, different things trigger us, and our attachment is disorganized. We don't have a foundational platform to stand on.
Correct. Yeah, there's no organization to their emotions. That's the child, but also there's no help from parent to organize their emotions as well. And also, this is the category where psychologists had to put, because they kept trying to fit them. Notice that ideas weren't all fitting into the three, and so it goes into a very fear-based model, and that's the cognitive, the correlation between the ideas. So that's attachment style. And connection, disconnection, a lot of it does have to do with how we connected to our parents, for your emotional needs. And so do you have the security, as we'll talk about later, to step out into vulnerability, to seek connection. Connection is something that needs to be sought. We talked about this earlier today, and it was some statistic, and I won't say the statistic because I'll probably be very wrong, that given the option of a shock or an hour of silence and solitude, an overwhelming percentage of men, like some over 60% of men, would rather take the shock. You can drop the slide for me, Rob. An overwhelming percent of men will take the shock, which is not a lethal shock, just a jolt, over an hour of silence and solitude. And 50% of women, around that, 1 and 2, would take the shock over solitude and silence. And it just shows that, number one, that we have a fear of disconnection, that we need connection, but also that our emotions aren't ready to handle the struggle that is connection, disconnection. And when we see Maslow's hierarchy, love and belonging in that type of connection is right in the center before esteem, because your esteem is built on who you're connected with and who you're disconnected from in a good esteem. And in the neural pathways that are connection and disconnection are the same neural pathways as physical pain. And so our connection and disconnection receptors are the same as our pain, physical pain. And so when you are disconnected or feel no connection, like your mind is saying that you are in physical pain. That we talked off as well about heartbreak, that the heartbreak is and a disconnection is a real thing. Anything else you want to say about this?
That's why we experience it. Yeah, that's why we experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that tracks.
That heartache. The reason why we experience heartache is because of the neural pathway that's connected to disconnection. Mm-hmm. Follows disconnection to pain.
Yeah. We think about ending relationships or ending, like, even around us, we can feel that or empathize with that fear of heartbreak. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely. I think a lot of us, and Rob just wrote, of the 87 emotions I feel the most, I think disconnection is among the top 5 for me. Connection and disconnection, the two of those have so much to do with belonging. Belonging is built upon it as well. But how you see yourself is who and what you're connected to and disassociated with, because those become mirrors in your life that you have. And Kevin says that you're the 5 people, the average that you hang out with.
You're the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most.
Yeah. So
what I find really interesting about disconnection is, in our modern world, one of the signs of disconnection is perfectionism. Mm-hmm. And it's seen as, maybe celebrated, but one of the dangers of perfectionism is social disconnection.
Yeah.
So
you were trying to be perfect
in perfectionism.
Yeah, right. You're trying to be perfect so that people will accept you.
Relationship.
Yeah.
Right.
You're trying to be perfect.
You're trying to be perfect to get yourself out of the relationship or the potential of relationship that sits before you.
Yeah. The one thing Brene Brown says, she's not said in this book yet, mm-hmm. but that we wear busyness as a badge of honor. Mm-hmm. That our like, how you're doing? Well, I'm really busy. And that's become our generic answer to our status in life. And because of our busyness, and that goes to perfection, that pushes us out of relationships or time with others or time spent, because we had the need or the feel to accomplish more, to be more, but instead we're losing the connections that we have. The passage that I have for that one is John. No, throw it up there, Rob, for me. When Jesus talks about the vine and the branches, that he's the vine, you're the branches. I'm the vine, you're the branches. If you remain in me and I am you, you will bear much fruit. Without me, you can't do anything. If you don't remain in me, you'll be like a branch that is thrown out, it's really small, and dries up. Thank you. That's great. Those branches are gathered up, thrown to fire, and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified when you produce much fruit, and in this way, prove that you are my disciples. So remain and be connected, and focus on not disconnecting. And then we get into insecurity. And I'll start with the passage this time, Rob. It's 1 Corinthians as well. Kevin also talked about 1 Corinthians earlier. But when I read the Pauline passages of Scripture, I really think that Paul was a insecure person, and even Kevin alluded to it earlier, where some follow Apollos, some follow Caiaphas or Cephas, some follow Christ, some follow Paul. There's this argument in the early church of who you're following, and it almost feels like Paul's feelings are hurt that he established this church, but now they're kind of putting him on the wayside. But he also talks about his qualifications of being a leader, being an apostle in 1 Corinthians. Thank you. No, not that one. Throw up the other one, Rob. That's the one Kevin was talking about.
Give him the address so he knows which one to put.
I'm not sure the address. I'm kind of just going off of it. 1 Corinthians 10, 25.
Apostle or whatever.
23-25. Maybe. Okay. I'll just keep moving forward. And if you get it, Rob, just throw it up for me. So you have basically 3 different types of insecurities, and we use insecurity a lot to describe emotional responses that we don't have an answer for. And so it may be lots of emotions that you're having, but you're like, well, I'm just insecure. Well, they're just insecure. They're very sensitive. You have domain specific insecurity. So like you're, when we think about scarcity or that, inaccessibility of certain items, you're insecure, like you're food insecure or shelter insecure. You have a lack of physical safety, so that puts you in the insecure mode. And so if we go back to Maslow's hierarchy again, right below belonging relationships. Oh, that's great, thank you. I'll tell you when to pull it up later, okay? You can pull it down and then we'll put it up again here soon. Just be ready for that one. And so you look at Maslow's hierarchy, underneath love and belonging, you have the idea of security and safety. And we need the access of financial, of emotional, of food, of shelter. And so all those things have to made up to where we're insecure and we are secure. And then you have relationships or interpersonal insecurity. And so you're insecure about your relationships. You're insecure about what people think of you. You're insecure about how you are perceived by other people. You're insecure about what your future looks like in certain relationships. It's the uncertainty that drives insecurity, especially in relationships, that we don't know the future. And hopefully, and based upon our own security, this person will accept me in the future as well, no matter what. Then you have the general or the personal insecurity. And this is when you're overly critical of yourself. And so going back to perfectionism again, which is the cause of a cause of disconnection, is now a cause of insecurity. And last week we talked about insecurity as perfectionism as a go-to for where you go when things don't go as planned. And so you have to go into your perfectionist drive that things will be better because I'm going to work that much harder. So you have like your body image or your performance at work, like your general or your very personal insecurity. The opposite of insecurity is self-security. And it's the idea of having empathy towards yourself, being non-judgmental and accepting. And also, I believe that it is impossible to live life without insecurity. And that insecurity is a very human idea. If we weren't insecure, we wouldn't have acquisition of food, water, shelter, relationships. We would just be alone on a beach somewhere, just without air. It's kind of a joke. The kind of a joke, but no one laughed
Can I add
there.
something to what you were saying there?
Go for it.
So most of the insecurity that you're talking about is, can you say a generalized insecurity, environmental insecurity, like something that is just a general insecurity? For example, going without food creates a general insecurity, or parental environmental insecurity that we grow up with, or job situation environmental insecurity. There's also insecurity that's caused by trauma, and that's a very specific event driven insecurity. And
Okay.
so, as you're saying, yes, it's possible, it's impossible to live without insecure. Is that what you said? It's impossible to live without some forms of
It's
insecurity.
a human condition to have security or else insecurity,
Right.
or else there would not be the drive for safety.
Right. So a lot of the insecurity that people feel, like COVID-19 fatigue and insecurity caused by the pandemic, or rape victims, molestation victims, and such, have a trauma around them based on that event, which creates insecurity. I do believe through a lifetime of therapy and very specific therapy, sometimes EMDR therapy, sometimes visualization, reframing therapy, such things. And also through mind, body, spirit, meditation, even sound healing. A lot of addicts are finding success through sound healing, where they go in and they're actually listening to different sounds. Sounds, EMDR, red light, EMDR, where they take a light and move between your eyes and make you follow the light. Those are finding, that's finding headway in reshaping, recarving new neural pathways that bypass trauma pathways, neural pathways. So I do believe that over time, not instantly, and it could be a very long time through very specific therapies and good therapy, that you can live without traumatic based insecurity.
Okay. I can see how that makes sense. I do want to kind of piggyback on what Jake was saying, though. So we were talking about attachment style and how there's secure attachment, and then there's 3 forms of insecure attachment. And even if you have an insecure attachment style, you can still learn secure attachment. And that doesn't mean that we don't experience insecurity. Like, we still have those feelings of anxiety, but we learn new patterns of communicating our needs, of finding connection with others, so we can still behave in a secure way despite feeling the insecurity.
Right. I agree with all that we're saying.
Yes, I think, to put it back into, like, if we follow, how do I want to say this, that trauma-based insecurity, according to Brené Brown, which could be totally based by, like, a baseless. She has 3 categories of insecurity. So where do we place it at? Do we place it on the outside of those 3 categories, or do we say
trauma based? Those are general insecurities that she's talking about.
totally?
So the lack of confidence and insecurity that's created around, she calls it, of course, what we were just saying, domain specific insecurities. Yeah. So insecure about specific resources in life. That's normal. What you're saying is normal. You said the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. Relationship insecurity. I feel insecure when somebody says threatening things or whatever. And then personal insecurity, where we are self-critical of our weaknesses and such. Traumatic-based insecurity is when I've experienced something in my life that creates a neural pathway, and then somebody goes like this, and it triggers me. Just, I mean, that for a PTSD person, that could trigger, anything could trigger PTSD. So that is a traumatic based insecurity that would be outside of those three categories.
Kelly. I think that's it for insecurity.
Well, heading forward.
Go for
Yeah,
it.
let's do it.
All right. So I'm talking about invisibility and loneliness. Invisibility emerged in Brown's research as a function of disconnection and dehumanization, where an individual or group's humanity and relevance are unacknowledged, ignored, or diminished in value and importance. Invisibility tends to feel like being overlooked, and we can experience that as an individual or as a group. We can also experience it being a representative of a group, and so being seen as the group rather than being seen as an individual. So something I think about when it comes to doing anti-racism work is that we often look at white supremacy's treatment of Black people and overlook the experience of other racial minorities. And so that is a form of invisibility. And that's really all I have on invisibility. Like, I think we have all felt overlooked. It's disconnection and it's painful.
Yeah. Well, I think
Did you want to add something?
Wouldn't you? I was just going to say, do you think that any marginalized group of any kind has the propensity of experiencing invisibility more than, a dominant race of people? So, for example, Native Americans are very invisible to some. Like, some people don't even think about Native American people and what we did and how they still are just down the street on reservation land and really thought of as just outside of even our own community. Just the land barrier and just the land itself creates and the setup of that reservation just creates an outside, like they're just pushed out in a sense. So when you go to Canada, it's much different. They have reservation land, but just the feeling and the experience and the investment that the Canadians have in First Nation people, it just seems different. So when you go to the Yukon, you'll see just very visible Native First Nation people. And then you cross into Alaska and you'll see very, very clear how we treat Native Americans as invisible.
Yeah, and this is part of the reason why there's conversations around representation and making sure that multiple voices are heard. Because we do treat people like they're invisible.
Yeah, women are treated as invisible.
Yep.
Any marginalized group, I think, has the chance of being treated as invisible, I would say.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
On to loneliness.
On to loneliness.
So we feel lonely.
You got
ending on an upper.
Really good. Yeah, ending on some uppers here, Sharaya.
I know. So we feel lonely when we feel disconnected or when we lack belonging. And loneliness is different from aloneness. The disconnection or lack of belonging is why sometimes we feel the loneliest when we're with other people. If we don't feel like we're connecting with those people, that is a very lonely place to be. And I think something Brene Brown talks about in another book called Braving the Wilderness is that in order to belong in our communities, we have to belong to ourselves first. And I think that's how we move from loneliness into aloneness. If we can belong to ourselves, if we're a safe place for ourselves, then we're able to feel safe when we're alone, and not necessarily lonely. The verse that I was thinking about is the obvious one. It's Luke 5:16. And it just talks about Jesus going to the lonely places to pray.
Mm-hmm.
I think
There it is.
Yep. But Jesus would withdraw to deserted places for prayer. I think our individualistic culture obscures the fact that we are designed to be interdependent, and to care for each other for survival. We need to belong in the same way we need to breathe. And because we don't recognize that, and our culture doesn't allow us to recognize that, we tend to feel shame around our loneliness. And then it goes unaddressed, and we don't want to talk about it. And then we feel more and more lonely. And so it blocks our ability to connect.
Sheree, do you think that, well, I'm just going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Because you've been a Christian a lot, probably. Well,
a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Your whole life. And
Yeah.
so you're a professional Christian. So I'm going to ask you as a professional Christian, do you think that the church does everything it can to skirt and avoid aloneness? Number one. And also, we hate on those that are lonely.
So skirt and avoid aloneness, maybe, but also we tell people to have their quiet time with Jesus in the morning. I don't know, what's coming up for me is what you talked about in the beginning, the difference between belonging and fitting in. Mm-hmm. I think fitting in is a very lonely place to be. And I do think the church fosters a culture of fitting in rather than belonging much of the time.
Yeah. True. I just think that the church... Wait, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask what the second question was, but you're still on the first. Go.
I'm still on the first one. I'm stuck on the first one, that the church does not... the church avoids aloneness. And it's thought of as just kind of a side little thing that we do. But the more important things are, like, yes, the church says, read your Bible and have your prayer time and your cup of coffee in the morning and do your thing, right? But it's not a practice in the church. Contemplation and like meditation is not a central idea to the church. So the church has always been about join a group and become a part of men's ministry and women's ministry and go on the hike and, the community hike, and make sure that we, show up on Sunday and clappy, 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 song, 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 praise, 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 preach, 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 like we just are sometimes I just feel like we're just like in the entertainment business sometimes
Yeah.
versus the spiritual growth business. And we might claim we're in the spiritual growth business, but it just seems that we're more in the entertainment business. So
Yeah.
that's why I really appreciate your inclusion on our Sunday mornings, your inclusion of spiritual practice. You and Becky and Amanda and Beth and Jake doing spiritual practice. A lot of that is not talking, and a lot of that is not, jumpy, jumpy, clap, 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 stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight type of, like church service. I think that Pete, the church, the obvious one for me is, when I wasn't married in the church.
Yeah. Did you see Rob's comment? I appreciated it.
No. How do I look at that? I think
Right
the
there.
church in general is becoming more aware how lonely we are and telling everyone to get married. Yeah. So I felt that when I was single in the church, where I was not the same as everybody else. I'm not a whole person because I wasn't married. And that created a lot of loneliness, the way that people treated me. Now, I hope we've done a little bit better job at Resonate of trying to create an environment that we're not so isolating to single people.
I think so. It helps having a good handful of us too.
Right. So I have this up now. I don't think the church cares if you aren't in that. If you aren't in that is your problem.
If you aren't, then that is your problem. If you are, that is your problem.
Maybe
aren't
Kelly, if you're
lonely,
still
aren't
listening.
connected.
I don't think the church cares if you aren't. Maybe Kelly, can you
if you aren't in, like if you're not inside the group, then that is your problem. It's your problem that you're lonely.
Right. Yeah, that's what kind of what I was saying is like we hate on the lonely people. The church hates on the lonely people. So if you're lonely, what's your problem? Or if you're lonely, well, join a group. The reason why you're lonely is you're not in a group, whatever group that is.
Spend more time with Jesus.
Right. So I think that the church is notorious for isolating the marginalized, definitely, but also isolating those that are experiencing emotions of loneliness. And the church has never known what to do with single people. It goes right back to the Catholics having the sacrament of marriage. And the sacrament of marriage is like a holy thing to attain. And whenever you do something that's a sacrament, it's like the pinnacle of existence. So baptism is a sacrament, communion is a sacrament, confession's a sacrament. So if you put marriage on that same plane, it becomes a high spiritual activity. And Jesus was single and Paul was single, and there was lots of single people, male and female, in the Bible. And many men left their wives, or wives were abandoned by their husbands because they chose Jesus. So there was a lot of disparity there. There's a lot of disconnection in the early church. So the early church knew what to do with single people. So it wasn't until maybe later years that we started experiencing this pinnacle of, and then you're still not good enough. If you're married, you're still not good enough if you don't have children, because now we need children because our quiver is not full. And so then you're thought of as second rate because your quiver is not full. Yeah. So there's lots of challenges, I think, that we have when it comes to loneliness, invisibility, and disconnection. Jake, do you have any to add more? Do you have any?
I think you hit it now. It's great.
I have something.
Please. Yes.
Can I close with a passage from Henry Nouwen?
Yes, please. Good old Henry. Speak to me.
Okay. The section is called Converting Loneliness into Solitude. As Christians, we are called to convert our loneliness into solitude. We are called to experience our aloneness not as a wound, but as a gift, as God's gift, so that in our aloneness we might discover how deeply we are loved by God. It is precisely where we are most alone, most unique, most ourselves, that God is closest to us. That is where we experience God as the divine, loving Father who knows us better than we know ourselves. Solitude is the way in which we grow into the realization that where we are most alone, we are most loved by God. It is a quality of heart, an inner quality that helps us to accept our aloneness lovingly as a gift from God. If I find God in my solitude, and you find God in your solitude, then the same God calls us together, and we can become friends. We can form a community, we can sustain a marriage, we can be together without destroying each other by clinging to each other. Thanks, Henry.
All right. Well, thanks, you two, for joining us. And those of you who listened tonight and will listen in the future, thanks for joining us. And with that, we'll sign off another broadcast. Good night, everybody.
Right.
Gracious Father, we give you praise and thanks for this holy communion, the body and blood of your beloved Son. The body is broken, God's love poured open to make us new. Lord, make us new. Abba, Father, we bless your name and take part in this holy communion. Make us all one, to love like your Son.